Yeah, it's for Abraham. It's so that Abraham understands that yeah, my son is worth something, and that I do have to offer something else, because it's just like, you know how it is like a human being. You just give me something for nothing, and I don't really appreciate it. So you have to work a little bit. You have to give something up at least to show that you really mean business. All right. So we have this now. Blood and water have gotten together. I just love this. How all this stuff supports baptism. Let's see. Now we're in Numbers. This is another one. This is a passage from Numbers. It's kind of like Leviticus. It's called subtitle, Use of the Ashes. It's talking about whoever touches the dead body of any human being is unclean for 7 days, and then they go through a whole other stuff that we don't have time for. It says, however, if you fail to purify yourself after touching the body of any deceased person, you defy the dwelling of the Lord to be a meeting tent, you shall be cut off from Israel. Since the water has not been splashed over that person, he remains unclean. His uncleanness still clings to him, and he is not part of the group. He's cut off from the family. He's out of the covenant. You don't get the right things sprinkled on you, and you're not in the club. You're not in the family. And so they go down, and they're talking about that the person has died in there, and that there's a tent. You want to get all these things purified. And what you do in this case is you do the same kind of drill. You sacrifice an animal, but in this case you burn the animal, and you mix the water with the ashes of the sacrificed animal. So once again, you're getting the sacrifice, some essence of the sacrifice thing into the water, and it's the same drill as this. You have the scarlet, you have the hyssop, you have the cedar stick, and you're running around sprinkling everything. Let me see if they had any additions down here. The unclean man who fails to have himself purified shall be cut off. Yeah, because he defies the sanctuary. They say things twice a lot. They probably do that for a reason. Remember, Jesus said you have to eat my flesh and drink my blood 6 times. Just as an aside. He must have extra meant that. As long as the water has not been splashed over him, he remains unclean. Yeah, this should be a perpetual ordinance for you. Okay. And that covers that one. So once again, we have the conflation of 2 things with the water. Now, so we know that in either case, if you kill the animal represents the atonement, the ashes represent the atonement. If it's blood, that represents the atonement of the sacrifice. What is the water in there for? Everybody knows what water is for, right? Water is for gargling. No, not in this case. It's for slip and slide. No, not in this case. What would water be for in this case? Washing. Yes, the water is for washing. So when you combine the blood and the water, you have the waters in there to cover to cover washing away of impurity, and the blood is in there to pay the price for the sin that you're wanting to get washed away from in a spiritual sense. So in other words, if we look at the reality continuum, I didn't just make that up. I think I invented this term. The reality continuum. Yes, here it is. Get fired up. Okay. This is physical. I'm just going to say this is non-physical. Remember, what's going on is that for everything, I think even rocks, that there's the rock, but that somehow that there's some extent of the rock into the non-physical world that we're simply not aware of. Especially since, remember, God said when He made everything that it was good, including rocks. So that in what's happening when you have the blood, here's the blood, which is, I think, has some expression in the continuity of reality, where we're only able to really perceive this part. And it's doing something on both sides, and the water is doing something on both sides. Now, at this point, blood and water are not miraculous. They're just symbolic. I mean, nobody was really cleansed of leprosy. You know, I mean, this is ritual processes. It wasn't miraculous, but I still see this going on in the whole sweep of reality, that the blood is doing something that we can't see. The water can be doing something very minor that we can't see either. We get to my favorite story. This is such a good one. We may finish tonight. I love this guy. Can I put his name up here? I don't know really how you pronounce it, but I always just say Naaman. Oh, if I could spell it, that would help, wouldn't it? There. Okay. What a great story. Let's see. The cure of Naaman. Naaman, the army commander of the king of Aram, I don't know, some Syrian guy, I think, was highly esteemed and respected by his master, for through him the Lord had brought victory to Aram. But valiant as he was, the man was a leper. Ooh, how horrible. Now the Arameans had captured from the land of Israel in a raid a little girl who became the servant of Naaman's wife. And I love this because I always think, that I've seen these poor pictures of like Father Damien and people that get leprosy. You know how their extremities begin to fall off and die? And like one of the first things to go bad is like the tip of your nose, your ears, your lips. No one's thinking it. Naaman's probably, his wife doesn't want him to kiss him. Don't touch me, don't even kiss me. You know? And I'm thinking how desperate and separated Naaman must feel from his wife having leprosy. It's like, you know how it is. You got that total physical relationship with your wife, and it's like the pop, don't touch me. Anyway, so the little slave girl says, if only my master would present himself to the prophet in Samaria. That's Elisha, who we remember is now wearing Elijah's mantle. And it says, Naaman went and told his lord just what the slave girl from the land of Israel had said. And the king said, go, and I will send along a letter to the king of Israel. I think at this point Israel had been conquered by Aram. So if the king sends a letter to Israel's king, it's like, you better take care of this because I'm telling you nicely. Anyway, so it says, Naaman set out, taking along 10 silver talents, 6,000 gold pieces, 10 blah, 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 to the king of Israel. He brought the letter which said, with this letter I'm sending my servant Naaman to you that you may cure him of his leprosy. I love this. I mean, just, poor king, who needs problems like this? Yeah, nobody needs it. Here we go. Let's see, Naaman's coming. He's got some kind of a chariot, probably like this, this kind of thing. There he is, he's a king. Sitting there. Okay. Leprosy. Yeah. Okay. There's some kind of a horse, that's really a poor one with it. You know how much you're paying for this course? Yeah. All right. And he's got all kinds of shiny things in the back. There he is. He comes to Israel. Now I love this part that the king says. When he read the letter, the king of Israel tore his garments and exclaimed, am I a god with power over life and death, that this man should send someone to me to be cured of leprosy? It's like, I'm going to lose my head. There's no way out of this. Anyway, and so when Elisha hears about this, and he says, goes to the king and says, what are you tearing your garments for? Let him come to me and find out that there's a prophet in Israel. So Naaman came with his horses and chariots and stopped at the door of Elisha's house. Here's a little of Elisha's house. And look, there's Elisha. All right, got his cloak on. Anyway, you can figure out Elisha does not have a very fancy house. And the big shot comes over there, stops at the door, and the prophet sends him the message. He doesn't come out to greet him, he just sends him, gets one of his little monkeys to go out there and give the big shot his message. He says, the prophet sent him the message, go and wash 7 times in the Jordan and your flesh will heal and you will be clean. But Naaman went away angry, saying, I thought he would surely come out and stand there and invoke the Lord his God and would move his hand over the spot and thus cure the leprosy. And besides that, the rivers in Damascus are a lot better than the water in Israel. Because, I've seen pictures of the Jordan River. It's not really all that nice looking a river. It's kind of punk and kind of muddy. And it's like, you look at it, this is not a place to go get yourself clean from anything, especially leprosy. So he said, well, I'll just go back home to Damascus and I'll bathe in some clean water. And I love his little advisors. So he says, could I not wash in them and be cleansed? With this, he turned about in anger and left. But his servants came up and reasoned with him, my father, if the prophet had told you to do something extraordinary, wouldn't you have done that? All the more now, he just said, wash and be clean. So you should do as he said. I just love it. So Naaman's like, all right, shut up already. So it says, Naaman went down and plunged into the Jordan. I hate that. That's not really, that's okay translation. He plunged into the Jordan 7 times, and tell me about his flesh.
It's clean.
Yes, it was. In fact, it was clean as a baby's butt. It said his flesh became again like the flesh of a little child, and he was clean. Yeah. So he gets a little bit of humility. He does it God's way instead of his way. And how many times does he get into the water? 7. Yeah. And by the way, we'll get to this a little bit later. That comes from, I think the word for 7 It's this. That's it. I think this is it. Shabbat is 7. And it comes from this triliteral root. And it means a whole lot of things. And it's the Shabbat Elizabeth, El Shabbat, has to do with 7. 7's a holy number, and in some cases, depending on how this root is pronounced with the vowel, sometimes it means an oath to sever oneself. So Elizabeth more or less means that God is my oath, that kind of thing. Another digression. Anyway, so he jumps in 7 times. And one of the reasons he goes in 7 times and not 6 is, of course, why? Why did he not go in 6 times instead of 7? Would he have gotten clean if he had immersed himself 6 times? No. Why? God said get in 7 times. Now the question is, why did God want him to get in 7 times? What is it about 7 that makes it the right amount? And that gets back to this triliteral root, because in some circumstances it means plenitude or ampleness or enough. In the case that less than 7 would not be a plenitude. But once you have 7, to have 8 would start to be cloying. It's like, what are you doing giving me 8 of this? Like, work for me for 7 years and you can marry my good-looking daughter. Okay, all right, but if you say, I need you to work 8 years, it's like, get off. Seven is enough. 7's enough. So that was the same thing in this case. He got in the enough number, which I think also why we have 7 sacraments, is because that's the enough number. And 8 would be too many and 6 wouldn't be the right amount. So he got clean. Here's a question for you. Suppose after all that Naaman had said, that word is too dirty. I call the shots right here. I'm just going to stand by the riverbank and I'm going to pretend. that I'm going to immerse. Would that work? Hey, suppose he said, I'm not getting in the water. Just go get some clean water and just pour it on me 7 times. Would that work? No. Nothing would work except doing it the way that God said to do it. Now, this is really kind of interesting. Is everything interesting in the Bible? First of all, is this the first time that water has actually functioned miraculously? In other words, it didn't just make him physically clean. It made him not just clean, but it healed him miraculously. Water hasn't done this before. So this is a big, big deal for what water can do. It's like with God's agent amping up the water, all of a sudden it does something that it couldn't have done before. And apparently, he also had a change of heart. I always think that Naaman, maybe the water actually functioned in some kind of primal baptismal way and kind of cleansed his soul a little bit. Didn't, improved his mood, certainly. Because the next thing he said, this is just terrific. I remember what it was. First of all, it says he returned with his whole retinue to the man of God. On his arrival, he said, now I know that there's no God in all the earth except in Israel. Please accept the gift from your servant. And he says, Elisha says, he says this all the time, as the Lord lives, that's always his introduction. As the Lord lives, whom I serve, I will not take it. And Naaman urged him, and he still wouldn't take it. He says, well, please let me, your servant, have 2 mule loads of earth, for I will no longer offer holocaust or sacrifice to any other God except to the Lord, with capital letters. So anyway, it's just very, very sweet. And I like the idea that Naaman wanted to take back some earth loads of Israel soil, because it ties all back to that thing. This is holy land, and actually the physical ground has some aspects of holiness to it that can't figure it out, but Naaman seems to intuit that very correctly. If I'm going to worship this Lord, I need to be standing on that God ground of Israel. So I guess he went home and had himself a charming time. Now, this is another really nice thing. Thus far, everything that we've done with blood and water has been sprinkling. You get your brush and you sling it and you sprinkle it on people. Now we've gotten to where the water in Greek would be, he baptizoed himself. He immersed himself in the Jordan River. And we could pick nits about, well, was the water waist deep? If it was waist deep, he could put his head all the way in the water. Was it this deep? Did he go in the water? Was it this deep? Did he pour it on his head? I don't care. All I'm interested in is that it's the Greek word baptize. And to some extent it means immersing in the water. And so that's another thing is remember, first the water was sprinkled, and now you immerse yourself in the water for some kind of handy-dandy healing. Now we jump way ahead to Ezekiel. Ezekiel's such a sweetheart. Remember, Jeremiah was always so pissy, and he had his reasons. But then Ezekiel has some real gracious things to say, and this one is actually kind of a riff on one of the nice things that Jeremiah said. What?
Did you notice that when Elisha told him to go to the river, he sent someone else?
Yeah, he sent an agent.
Right,
You're so
just like with
smart.
the loaves and fishes.
Yeah, I never noticed it in the way you're talking about.
Yeah, just
I'm
like
gonna
with
be
the
definitely
loaves
using that
and
next
fishes.
year. Yeah, God sent his, Elisha, the authorized agent of the Lord, sent his own authorized agent
Yes.
to instruct the doofus about what he was supposed to do.
Yes.
Yeah, that's terrific. I'm gonna see, this is good.
Yeah.
This is good. Okay. I think we talked about this a little bit. Jeremiah had been saying that, behold, I'm going to bring you a new covenant. I'm going to write my law in your hearts and all this kind of real dear, sweet stuff. And this kind of ties into that. Ezekiel is speaking, of course, on behalf of God. For I will take you away from among the nations, gather you from all the foreign lands, where they'd all been taken away. I will bring you back to your own land, and I will sprinkle clean water upon you to cleanse you from all your impurities, all your sins, he's saying. Not that you haven't had a bath in weeks, so I'm going to give you some water. No, I'm going to sprinkle you and cleanse you from impurities, and from all the idols I will cleanse you. I'll give you a new heart and place a new spirit within you, taking from your bodies your stony hearts and giving you natural hearts. I will put my spirit within you and make you live by my statutes, careful to observe my decrees. It's so wonderful. And the thing is that this is the critical difference that digressing again, is that what Ezekiel's getting at is, yeah, back in the Sinai days, God wrote 10 commandments down on stone because that's where you were as a people in those days. But you've come around, you've done some suffering, you've strayed, you've come back, you've been unfaithful, you repented, you've learned a lot as a people. Now, this is something that I think I can trust you, is that I just want you to obey the law of love. If you love me perfectly, like Adam and Eve, then you don't need any rules. Now, I'm always telling my kids this when they were growing up. They said, "Why do we have so many rules around the house?" I said, "Well, let me ask you this: Do your mama and I have any rules? Does she tell me I have to do this, and do I tell her that? Does she tell me you have to change the oil, and I tell her you have to cook the food?" And they say no. And I say, well, then why are we doing that without being told? And eventually they figure it out, and we do the same thing in sixth grade. They say, it's because you love her. I say, yeah, where there's love, you don't need rules because you're interested in what's the best thing for the other person. It's when the more you think about yourself, the more you need rules. The less you think about the self, the more you're other-oriented, the less you need the rules because you're just naturally thinking about other people. In fact, this is kind of like the journey of a lifetime. Is a little baby. Here's a baby. Let's see. I'm going to make an angry baby. There we go. Okay, here we go. Draw the whole baby. Here you go. Whole baby. Crying baby. There's little you back. Okay. Okay. Tell me about this crying baby. Who's this baby thinking about 24/7? Oh, yeah. That's all babies do. They think about themselves all day, 24/7. And so the whole process of becoming an adult is to learn that baby has to be trained to think less and less about himself and more about other people. And if you ever arrive at the end of that journey, you're not thinking about yourself at all. You're just thinking about other people. And I always think, man, I have so far to go. I'll die before I get to that point, but definitely having kids was quite a liberating experience, isn't it? Yeah, it's all the liberation you can stand. Anyway, so we finished with that, and now we jump ahead to, we did Ezekiel. Okay, now we get to John the Baptist. I love John the Baptist. Let's see. In those days, John the Baptist appeared preaching in the desert of Judea and saying, "Repent, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand." Ooh, it was of him that the prophet Isaiah had spoken. I love it when the New Testament just comes out and just lets you know that, now, just so you don't have to go digging back through the Old Testament, we're going to tell you why this is significant. The prophet Isaiah had said, "A voice of one crying out in the desert, prepare the way of the Lord, make straight his paths." And what could be more convenient? John wore clothing made of camel hair and a leather belt around his waist. His food was locusts and wild honey. I love this. In Sunday school class, we call John the bug eater. And here's the thing about one reason I think that John does this. He sits out in the desert. He dresses in rags. He eats bugs. He probably smells dreadful. He's like the wild man of the desert. But I think when you live that way, then you have instant credibility. And so then when you decide it's time for you to stand out there and yell at everybody and scold everybody, they will listen to you Because like, well, what does he have to gain? Look, he's a bug eater. So you would believe what he would have to say. It would be intuitive that this is somebody who has God's authority. He is certainly not thinking about himself very much. So it says this: at that time, Jerusalem, all Judea, the whole region around the Jordan were